Today on Vintage HLC Show and Tell, we're going to look at Kitchen Kraft Tulips. This is treatment number KK303. It was developed in 1937 along with the Kitchen Kraft shape and was used all the way into the early 1950s. So we'll start by looking at some pieces as well as the different sizes of sprigs. This is the 10-inch mixing bowl, covered jug, pie plate, medium covered jar, small covered jar, individual casserole, salt and pepper shakers, and the coffee pot, or teapot. It was modeled as a coffee pot. I believe it was 1951. Look at the back stamp. Kitchen Kraft oven serve. HLC logo up top, USA on the bottom, no date code. And it's this piece that tells us that it was made into the 1950s. So a rather long running line. All with red trim. There's one variation to talk about, and that's the blue trim version, which comparatively is pretty rare. Look at the marking, it's the same as the red trim version, of course. Somewhat common treatment, collectible. I could see people who don't collect Homer Laughlin collecting this or buying it in the antique shops because it is very colorful. The red trim and colors look very late 1930s, early 1940s, that World War II era. So that's a little bit about Kitchen Kraft Tulips. Again, KK303 from circa 1937 to the early 1950s. And then we see it again on Georgian Eggshell dinnerware. Same sprigs, although there's no trim on any of these pieces. This is the third set I've encountered in the past 20-some years. And before we get into this set, I need to talk a little bit about specialty ware and decorated seconds and decorated thirds. I've gone over this subject several times in previous videos, where if Homer Laughlin had a piece of ware that was less than perfect, they would decorate it and then sell it as a second or at a discount price. Usually, way back, they would put a bunch of stuff in a barrel and then send it to a hardware store or a small grocery store, and they would just sell odds and end pieces. This one from 1937 is the null shape, and you can see all those little specks in the glaze. All that kill dirt. Or sand bumps as they're sometimes called. There's three big ones right there. So rather than throw it out, they put on this decal and luster trim. And lusters were used about 1910 to the mid-1930s. And in the mid-1930s, they switch over to wash trims. This is an oven serve 8-inch mixing bowl. They put the decal and wash trim on it. So when you see something like this with the wash trim or with the luster trims, you should stop and say there must be something wrong with it. And if you do a little inspection, you will find something wrong with it. In this case, let's keep turning this. There it is. You see all that imperfection in the glaze. Has a very rough texture to it, almost like sandpaper. So this kept it from being a first. So instead, they put on this wash trim and decal. And now you have a sellable piece of ware rather than throwing it out. And then we have another piece. This one has a non-standard decal. It's on the Virginia rose shape. This is the Pueblo decal, which we would normally see on Century or even Swing Eggshell. And we have these gold stamps. But there's something wrong with this one. And you see the little speck down there at the bottom. Probably hear it. This comes from 1954. So that was an option for them to take seconds or even thirds and decorate them using either lusters, wash trims, or non-standard decals. And they did this on serviceware like jugs, platters, nappies, and bakers. But when it came to dinnerware, you do not see lusters and wash trims. Maybe once in a while you'll see an odd plate with a luster on it, like Republic or Trellis or Knoll. But for the most part, you're not going to find any of those wash trims or lusters on dinnerware. And when I say dinnerware, I mean like teacups and saucers and dinner plates and soup bowls and so on. So when they had these place setting pieces, they had three options. They could either throw them in the dump, sell them to an outside firm, who would then decorate them with decals or elaborate gold decorations and gold stamps. We've seen some of those before. Or they could just decorate them themselves. And in this case, this is what happened. So they have these Georgian eggshell seconds, some of them are thirds, and they take the Kitchen Kraft tulip decals and apply it to these pieces. They don't put any trim, which sort of makes sense because since these pieces are of lower quality, they wouldn't waste the time and money in putting red trim on them or gold trim. I think gold trim would actually look good with this decal. But we have a similar situation with the serving pieces, that if you find tulips, the Kitchen Kraft tulips, because there are other tulip decorations, if you find Kitchen Kraft tulips on dinnerware, then you kind of have to stop and say, okay, what's wrong with it? Because that's the only time they really used it on dinnerware. So we'll look at a couple pieces and see where are the imperfections. For this nappy, which we've already seen, there's a nice little black speck on the bottom, and it is warped. It doesn't have a nice shape to it. You can feel it more than you can see it. Maybe you can see that, but it's out of round. So rather than use something like this in a standard Georgian eggshell line, like Chateau or Greenbrier or, let's see, Cotillion, Rambler Rose, I mean there are many Georgian eggshell lines. They could have used it in there, but because it's not the best condition, it became a decorated third or even a decorated second. This comes from 1948. Let's see. The teacup. This is a pretty bad one. This probably should have been thrown in the dump. Something got on there and it kept it from being glazed on the bottom. And it is discolored. You can hear it. But they decorate it with the tulip decal and put it with this less than perfect set. One of these. This is lug soup. You can probably see that on the bottom. That big chunk of clay that is stuck to the bottom and been glazed over. Again, 1948. I'll look at one more piece of gravy. Similar situation, there's a big chunk of clay on the outside. So if you were to encounter this set and you go, oh, there's too many things wrong with it, well, you kind of have to expect there to be something wrong with it. Whenever you see this decal on dinnerware, there's going to be something wrong. The only time it's going to be of a higher quality is when it appears on Kitchen Kraft, because that's where it was intended to be. So that's a little bit about Kitchen Kraft tulip on the Kitchen Kraft shape with red trim and blue trim, and decorated seconds and thirds on Georgian eggshell.